Hi, welcome to my channel, Why the Book Wins. My name is Laura, and today I'm here to do a book haul video. And I post these, as of right now, I'm posting them every Sunday, and I recently bought a lot of books, so I have enough material to do book hauls weekly as of right now. So I'm kind of separating them out, and also, like this one, I'm going to be sharing my first edition copies. And then I have another video where it's like vintage books that I have that are really old. And then I have other ones where it's just like special editions, but also just books that aren't first editions and they're not especially old. So they're just a regular book haul, I guess, with those ones. But anyway, today I'm sharing my first edition books, and I'm going to start out with one that I am very proud of because I saw other people selling this book for, like, there was one that was $100, and I'm sure there were some that were a bit less than that, but they were pretty expensive. And I ended up finding it for $12. So I was so proud of myself for that. And it is for a book I have actually reviewed, and it is the UK first edition of The Beach by Alex Garland. So Garland is British, and so I wanted to get the British first edition because that's the true first edition. So I have the American one I'll be sharing, but you know, American first editions are fine, but this one is the true first edition. And it is paperback, but it's like thick paperback, and it even has this on here, so that's kind of cool. And I also just love the picture on there, how it's the beach, but it's kind of weird looking the way it's like photoshopped or whatever. And then you have the cartoon Daffy down there, which if you are familiar with the story, there is a character named Daffy, and he's named after Daffy Duck. Yeah, it seems like, oh, it's this beautiful beach, but then it's like, oh, but then it's kind of weird and photoshopped weird, and then you got Daffy Duck down there. So I think it's a great cover for the book. And in the back, we have Alex Garland right there. And so, yeah, so this is a true first edition. So we have the numbers right there. And I mean, I don't know if it's necessary to show the proof that these are first editions, but I don't know. I feel like I need to show that they truly are first edition, that I'm not lying to you guys or something. But anyway, I was really happy to get this book. And like I said, I do have a book review for it, and I did compare it with the movie. So I have both of those on my YouTube channel. But just a real quick review on this. I really enjoyed this book. It's not one I don't read any books on a regular basis. Like, there's no book where I'm like, oh, I read this book every year. And yeah, like even books I really love, I spread out my readings of it because one, I read a lot of books. And so it's like, do I want to reread this book, or do I want to read something new? And usually I go with something new. So the fact that it's not a book I would reread soon, it's not going against it because I'm just not the type to reread books close together. Anyway, but I really enjoyed the story. It's a slow burn. So a lot of this book moves pretty slow, but there is enough eeriness, or maybe not eerie, but it's unsettling. And you can tell it's just like a powder keg ready to blow. But it is a slow burn. You do have the character of Daffy, which helps make things a bit more interesting. And yeah, and I loved Daffy's relationship with the main character, which I'm drawing a blank on his name now, but yeah, I really enjoyed this book. And I feel like talking about this, I have to give a warning because the ending is crazy and it gets pretty violent. So just a warning as far as that goes. But anyway, first edition of The Beach. And real quick, I wanted to share that I do also have the first American edition of The Beach. And this is a really cool cover as well. I do like the British one better, but so here's my first edition of The Beach. And like I said, just because I feel like I should, I will show the title page. And there we go. So with that number line, if you didn't see my other video, books, they have that number line. And if there's a 1 in the number line, it means it's the first edition. As you can see here, there's that 1. So yeah, American version of The Beach. So the next book is one I am really excited about as well. I've read this book, but I have not covered it on my podcast, but I will be next year. And that is The Joy Luck Club by Amy Tan. And this cover is just so beautiful. Like, look at that. I just love it so much. And And this book is from 1989, so it's not crazy old. But this book is obviously like really famous, so it's pretty exciting to get the first edition. And there is the number line. So yeah, such a beautiful book. And as far as the story goes, I've only read this once. Sorry, I'm trying to get the glare off of it, but I've read this once and I really enjoyed it. I guess it would be considered a chick flick because it's about a mother and their daughters, and the perspectives change. And it did get confusing because we hear all the stories about the moms, and then we move to their daughters and the daughter's relationship with her mom. And so when I read it again, I'm going to like write down, okay, like this is what happens with this mom and this is her daughter, because a daughter would be referencing her mom, and I'd be like, wait, like which character was her mom? Like I would get them confused and not know like which story had been the story for this girl's mom, if that makes sense. But I really enjoyed it. Aside from the confusion as far as that goes, it was a well-written story. And even though it's a chick flick, I would recommend it to men too. So men can definitely benefit from reading chick flicks, especially well-written ones like this. Next year, I will be doing an in-depth review for this, and I will be comparing it with the movie, which I have also seen, but I saw the movie like in 2007 or 8, so it's been a long time. So I'm looking forward to getting back into that. But yeah, Amy Tan, Joy Luck Club. Up next is another book I have also covered on my podcast, and that is A Long Way Home by Saru Brearley. And this one, the movie Lion, is based on this book, Lion with Dev Patel. And this podcast, I had my sister on for it, so we talked about this, so that was fun. But this is a first edition, and Brearley is from Australia. And so this book is the first edition for, it makes it seem like it's the first edition for like the UK and America all in one. I don't know, but here's the title page. So it's at least the first American edition, but it says up there all the other countries too. But anyway, so I was excited to get this one. And this book, so it's a great story. And Brearley, it's a memoir. And memoirs can sometimes, they're not always the best written, because just because someone has a great story to tell doesn't mean they're a good writer. And Brearley, it's not like he's a terrible writer, but like I talked about in the podcast with my sister, he sometimes just lacked the emotion sometimes. And so the movie does a good job at getting the emotion where there was none in the book. Not to say this book has no emotion whatsoever, but yeah, anyway. The story is incredible though, because he is born in India, and then at age 5, he gets separated from his mom and siblings, and then he's like in the streets of Calcutta for like, I don't know, a while, and he goes to an orphanage, and then he's adopted by an Australian family, grows up in Australia, and then as an adult, he tries to find his mom again because he still remembers her. He was 5 I think he was 5 when he got lost. But India is huge, obviously, and so he has a hard time finding exactly where his hometown was, and he was also so young that he wasn't even sure what the name of his hometown was, and so it's an amazing story. And spoiler alert, he does find his mom. But yeah, it's an amazing story. And so I'm glad I have the first edition of this, because even though I have my complaints with the writing, yeah, it's a great book overall as far as that goes. So yeah, A Long Way Home. And up next is another book that has a movie adaptation of it. However, I have not yet covered it on the podcast. This is one I read. So the movie, so first of all, it's Painfully Rich. And the movie is called All the Money in the World, and it came out in 2017. And so I watched the movie when it came out, and then I heard it was based on a book. So then I read the book and I really enjoyed it. And so that was in 2017 before I did the podcast. And so I will be reading it again for the podcast, hopefully next year. But this is my first edition copy. And there we have it. And so this book is about the Getty family, and the movie, All the Money in the World, it's about like one section of this book, because this book is, I don't know if saga is the right word, but it tells the story of like the whole Getty family. And I love books like that where we learn about all the kids and the parent and the grandkids. And so I love stories like that go in depth about everybody. So this was a really well-written book, a really well-researched book. And like I said, the movie just tells one story from the Getty family. So if you enjoyed the movie, I highly recommend the book, and you can learn more about the whole family in general. But yeah, I'll be posting a podcast for this at some point next year. But yeah, my first edition of Painfully Rich. And my next book is one I have also already covered on the podcast, and that is The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. Ooh, trying to stop the glare. But this is a great book, and I recommend it to everybody. It's about Henrietta Lacks, and her cancer cells were taken, and they're called the HeLa cells, and they were the first cells that were able to be grown and to duplicate. And so it has changed the world, like literally. Everybody has benefited from the HeLa cells. And this again is a story kind of like Painfully Rich, where we follow Henrietta, but also just like all of her family and just what happened to her, like she died of cancer, and then her cells, and how that affected her family, like her kids, her grandkids, her husband. And so it's written by Rebecca Skloot. So it's not written by the Lacks family, but she knew them, like one of the daughters in particular, she had a really close relationship with. And so she did a ton of research. It took her like over 10 years to write this book. And it is so well written. Like, I am not a science person, or like I don't work in the healthcare industry, but she writes this in a way that is so digestible for anybody, regardless of, like, even if you know nothing about science, which is like who I am. And she majors in creative nonfiction. And so she's telling a story that really happened, but she writes it in a way that feels like a novel almost. So it's very, it keeps your interest. You're never bored when you read this. So highly recommend this book. And this is a first edition. So we have that right there. So yeah, my copy of Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. Up next is one that I am very excited to get because it's like just such a famous book. And once again, it's one I have covered. I actually, by the time I post this video, maybe I'll have the YouTube video for this, for my book and movie comparison, but it is Jurassic Park. And if you want to hear my book and movie comparison, you can find it on my podcast, which is on all podcasting platforms, Why the Book Wins. But anyway, I was really happy to get a first edition copy of this. Very cool cover. It does have the kind of pages, if you can see, where it's like, they're all uneven. I don't get why people do that, why publishers do that. I don't know. It's not a look I like, but so first trade edition, so it says a signed first edition of this book has been privately printed by the Franklin Library. So I don't know. I guess if I really wanted to, I could look into a Franklin Library edition, but this is still a first edition copy. But yeah, this is a great book. It was better than I thought it would be. It was more scientific as well than I thought it would be. Like, he really gets into how these dinosaurs are created. And it is quite different from the movie. So even if you've seen the movie, you can read this book and things don't happen the same. So you'll still be surprised by the events that happen. But yeah, if you want to hear my thoughts on how it compares to the movie, like I said, you can look it up on my podcast. And I'll try to get a YouTube video up for it. Like, I upload my podcast onto YouTube, so it's just the audio. But I will post that on YouTube as well, so you can listen to that if you're interested. But yeah, Jurassic Park. Next up is Unbroken by Laura Hillenbrand. And again, this is one I have read. I actually haven't seen the movie, but there is a movie directed by Angelina Jolie, so I will be covering that on the podcast. I read this book in 2017. And so there's a lot of books I read that year that have movie adaptations, but I have not yet covered them because the books are too fresh in my mind, I guess. And like I said, I'm not one who frequently rereads books, even ones I like a lot, like this. It's an amazing book. But when it comes to either rereading one I've already read or reading something new, I'll often choose something new. So that's why there's so many books, like I said, from 2017 that I read, because I read a lot that year. But I just have not yet covered them on the podcast because they're too fresh in my mind, I guess. But anyway, this is a first edition copy. And this is about Louis Zamperini, and he was a runner in the marathon, like the Olympics that took place in Germany when Hitler was in charge before World War II. So Louis Zamperini took part in Hitler's Olympics, and then he was in World War II, and then his plane crashed and he was floating on a raft for, I forget how long, but a long time. And then from the raft, he like became a POW, and then even after he got rescued from being a POW, he then struggled with alcoholism. So some of that is kind of spoilers, I guess. But even if you know all of those events that happen, it's so well written and it's such an incredible story. And I cried when I read it. Like I cried at the end. And yeah, it's just an incredible story. And Laura Hillenbrand is an amazing author. She also wrote Seabiscuit. And so she really does her research. And I will eventually be covering this on the podcast where I compare it to the movie. But yeah, so my copy of Unbroken. And last, but certainly not least, is my copy of Misery by Stephen King. And I have a book review for this up. And I also compared the book with the movie. So if you've seen either of those, you will know that I love this book. And I haven't read much Stephen King, maybe like 4 of his books. But this one was incredible and I loved it so much. And I also, like, side note, I like that without the book jacket. I don't know, I like how the binding looks that way, and then you have the SK right there. And so I've looked up first editions of this book, and all the first editions on the title page, it doesn't say first edition, and there's no number line. But apparently, yeah, like there's other books of this for sale that say they're the first edition, and their title page looks exactly like mine, which is like there's nothing on there. There's nothing there that distinctly says it's a first edition, but I'm guessing it is. So yeah. But anyway, first edition of Misery, and you can check out my book review for this, but great book. Of course, it's Stephen King, so you're going to have some violence in there, but it's honestly not that bad. Again, I haven't read a ton of his books, but it's not like horror by any means. But yeah, it'll get you. It's so much more than just a man being held hostage by a crazy lady who loves his books. There's so much more to it, and I highly recommend it. And I will end this video there. I just went through quite a few books, but I hope you enjoyed this video and give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel. Every Sunday I do book hauls, I do book reviews, I do book and movie comparisons. And then there's also videos where I just share some of my general thoughts, book related or movie related. So yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.